This is a story about the invisibility of the obvious. It is also the diary of a journey to the past. The race to find Romana Turina, a name that I first encountered in the letters of a British veteran, my informer, who served in Trieste between 1945 and 1946. Romana Turina nasce nel 1908 a Monfalcone, a Trieste. Interessato ai movimenti filoslavi, attivi a Trieste dall'inizio del XX secolo, è possibile che fosse presente quando il movimento filoslavo attaccò il giornale Il Piccolo nel 1915, noto per la posizione filo-italiana. Il movimento filoslavo fu responsabile tra il 1920 e il 1941 di diversi attentati terroristici, molto famosi quelli contro le scuole che venivano bruciate. Catturato nel 1936, Turina viene mandato nella casa penale sull'isola di Ponza. L'amnistia del 1937 gli garantisce il perdono. Nel dopoguerra Turina tornerà a Trieste, dove muore nel 1986.
Turina Vladimir, šolnik in prosvetni delavec, je bil rojen 26. maja 1908 leta v Tržiču, carinskemu uslužbencu Ivanu Turina in Alojziji rojeni Furlan. Od leta 1924 do 1928 je študiral na Trgovski akademiji v Ljubljani, nato pa na Akademiji za gospodarske in trgovske vede Univerze v Trstu, kjer je 1935. leta promoviral. Januarja 1936. leta so ga fašisti kot pripadnika takrat preganjene slovenske narodnosti aretirali in skupaj z drugimi mladinci obsodili na 5-letno konfinacijo na otoku Ponca in v Kalabriji. Po amnestiji jeseni 1937. leta je pribežal v tedanjo kraljevino Jugoslavijo.
The British Intelligence Service introduced me to yet another Vlad. Bemused before I met my informer, I decided to visit an unknown archive. The curator promised me they held relevant information in Trieste. Trieste. James Joyce was there. Yet the first image coming to my mind is the blood on Franz Ferdinand's uniform in June 1914, Sarajevo. The sad face of Gavril, the assassin that wanted a world without empires. And then the mess on the road. The men with their traditional outfits. Trieste, the Austrian-Hungarian port. The coffins, the priests, the officers and the morning parade. The people on the road and on the train to the capital, Vienna. Lots of trains that year. Many filled with excited laughter and the fire taking the boys to the front. I arrive at night. The train slides between ghostly warehouses. They look empty. Nothing is here, only a name to tell me where I am. Trieste. The city was hard fought over. Occupied by the Italians in 1918 and then annexed in 1920. Yet today the city is remembered for becoming the free territory of Trieste under the Allied government after the Second World War. Thousands of British men served here and enjoyed the American dream brought in by the Marshall Aid. They are remembered as the British Element Trieste Force, the Bet4. Memories of that wealthy period are vivid. Certainly those times were thrilling. People wrote novels, films. The city had its own police and services attached. The palace is still here. The building I'm looking for is not in the centre, though. It is in St. James. They told me this used to be the communist district. Somewhere in here, there is the Slovenian archive. Stairs. More stairs. Silence. I'm here. I hope somebody will translate for me. The curator reassures me she's happy to translate for me. Papers start to come out of the shadows. Professor Romana Turina, Prosecco Street, 2A, Opocina, Trieste. The curator tells me that this was a ticket sold to build the Slav National Home in 1904. It was a polyvalent palace for cultural activities and business offices. It lodged the first hotel with ensuite bathrooms in Europe, the Balkan. The Italians did not like it much, it seems. The squadristi burned the palace on 13th of July 1920. The curator tells me that her grandfather remembered how in the night the sky over the city was red. Nobody was permitted to put out the flames. Nothing Slav remained. I went looking for the building. The plaque recalls how the centre of the Slovenian cultural and economic life in Trieste was burnt by the nationalist intolerance on 13th of July 1920. It proclaims how the Narodni Dom today is alive in the new European home. Recently, Italy gave back to the indigenous Slovenians one room. Nearby, someone gives a lecture. Today, this is the School of Modern Languages for Translation and Interpretation of the University of Trieste. Back at the archive, an anonymous photo of trees is haunting me. There is nothing but trees. Still, it was worthy of being kept for some reason. I find a passport. Vladimira was allowed to travel to Yugoslavia between 1927 and 1928. There is something about the politics of the border. The curator says it was about making the people Italians. That's why they closed the schools. Then, cards. It takes a while before I see what these are about. These are all executive orders for the change of surnames. The decree claims to give back the Italian name to the family. The curator suggests we visit the old cemetery. Some forgotten graves are still marked with change of names. I promise myself I will. The Slovenians must have been among the first organised anti-fascists in Europe. Tigger gave a fight for the right of the indigenous Slavs in Italy, but was crashed by the fascists through the 1920s to the 1940s. I had no knowledge of this. I knew Vladimiro as an opponent to the fascist regime. It didn't occur to me that he could have been the vessel for a different legacy, the fight for the survival of the Slavs of Trieste. I can now see why this photo was so important to Vladimiro. People were sent to the Italian penal houses. The Slav intelligentsia were exiled as early as 1919. Anti-fascist Vladimiro was sentenced to 5 years. In 1939, Vladimiro is a private officer in Belgrade. 1944, refugee in Yugoslavia. Was it then that he met my informer, the British soldier on a mission behind enemy lines? I didn't know there were Italian concentration camps, some exclusively for Slavs. Martina, the curator, tells me Vladimiro used to meet other anti-fascists in Monterradio, above Trieste. The Germans opened their own concentration camp, equipped with a crematorium. Yet photos tell me that the Italians were never far behind. At San Saba, Mussolini's slogans were clear for the eye to see. Martina presents me with another folder of documents, more photos, and a note in Italian. It reads, "To be or not to be isn't a personal question. It's not about substituting one's self with another, a borrowed one. It is about responsibility in the face of your history to the generations that will come after you, or will not, if you allow them to delete your descendants along with yourself." This must have been Vladimiro's primal landscape. I think there are missing documents here. I think he must have been Slovenian by birth. He must have been working with Tito and with the British. Was he a translator or a spy? Was Vladimir in Trieste in May in 1945? Are these people his friends?
Film just received from Trieste shows quite clearly the display of force made in that city by Marshal Tito's men. To all of us who confidently hoped that the United Nations would await the decisions of a round-table peace conference, the situation in Trieste was bewildering and alarming, to say the least. The Yugoslavs kept up a system of patrols who marched through the city fully armed. Even when off duty, Tito's soldiers and partisans kept their arms with them. By way of contrast, British servicemen strolled about without arms of any kind, and it may well be largely due to this forbearance that clashes were avoided during the height of the crisis.
I go and open the last envelope from the Italian Ministry of Education. He was a Slovenian. What an irony. I postponed opening this envelope for so long, tossed it aside as irrelevant. Who would have thought he kept proof of his Slovenian identity in here? Martina brings me a few more photos. They speak about happy memories. She tells me that in the background we can see Triglav Mountain. Every true Slovenian has to ascend it at least once in their life. On the train, I remember I did not visit the cemetery.
It was time to meet my informer at the Bedfords reunion. I waited. I looked for him. And nobody seemed to know him. Graciously, some of the members agreed to talk to me about Trieste.
Our intelligence corps, the unit which speaks for itself what it is, at the time that we were in Trieste, they had the biggest unit that the intelligence corps have ever had anywhere at any time before or since, even the Second World War, or even today in the world as it is today. They had a huge number of people because of the position it was in, right on the edge of the Iron Curtain, and the ability to be able to get information across the border from Yugoslavia in and back and forth. And they also had to deal with an awful lot of displaced persons. At that period of time, there were so many people who were displaced, stateless, who were coming across from the east. They then had to be monitored and checked to define whether they were genuine or whether they were agents. And it was not my field, but the stories I've heard were quite exciting. It was a really quite an important part of why we were there.
The only thing they said was that they were very frightened when the Yugoslavs liberated the city of Trieste, because they came in from that side of Trieste where San Saba is. The Yugoslavs came in down through Muggia, Lazareto, Goldina, that part. They came in through there, and they were very frightened because, well, they hated the Yugoslavs, and the Yugoslavs really hated the Italians because of what they had done in parts of Yugoslavia when after Italy entered the war, and the Germans alongside them.
Danny never arrived at the event. He had passed away. I could not help but play out the meeting in my head. Then they all started to come along, all the dead populating my wall. I could not recall the original order of the pictures. The frames had taken new positions, as if leading a life on their own. Looking into their faces, I could perceive their lips were moving. but I could not read them, only imagine what they were telling me. My identity seemed to reorganize itself. I tried to capture it, to picture it from my own point of view, the one born too late, when everything had already happened, had already sedimented into the past. But the rings of my construction continued to break down. They continued to claim attention, refusing to offer any security. And as the dead look at me, toiling, the pages remain tattered, loose. At home, it translated into an endless struggle to patch names and faces together. Decoding the past took me into the night. It surprised me at dawn. I had no final answers. Why was my father's photo among Vladimir's papers? Why was a sketch of my family's village kept in Vladimir's diary? The village. Did my grandfather hide the English soldier? Is it there that Vladimir met both? My informer smiles at me knowingly, sitting forever in the London's barracks. Everything he had to tell me, he would say at the Bedford's reunion. Except there had been no reunion for us. Everything was lost. I stopped production. It was then that I remembered. I had seen those eyes before. In my grandmother and the man in the photo album. The same expression, the same eyes, the sudden pang in the stomach when I recognized that face. Was this the legendary old brother, my grandmother's father? If this was the older brother, Antonio, and that his wife, Anna Clay, the baby is my grandmother. Then the boy is her older brother, Giovanni. If this photo was family to Vladimir, how does he fit in? Who was Vladimir? I decided to look into my old notes. So far, I had learned that Vladimir had been a liberal Slovenian professor, a member of the Slovenian community in Trieste. My father, on the other hand, an Italian, a photographer who managed a little shop on the outskirts of the city. How were they connected? Were they spies? So many names changed, from the Slav to the Italian. So many people lost into an imposed identity. Among them all the shades of endurance and defeatism, hope and sorrow. Endless lists. Villages, streets, surnames, names. Names on the graves, all changed from Slav to Italian. Surnames were not simply translated. I can see they were often allocated randomly. Maybe accordingly to sound, resemblance, and familiarity. And here it is. Also my name changed. I felt physically sick. I had to put space between that book and my body. as if I could stop the past from touching me. I gave up and I called my father. "What do you care?" he asked me. Then he answered, reluctantly, that I was my cousin, Giovanni's son. So now I knew. So simple.
Tiny, restless Trieste, free territory on the Adriatic Sea, long coveted by Yugoslavia and Italy. Marshal Tito of Yugoslavia bluntly demands that Trieste city continue as a free port and the surrounding area be swallowed up by his country. In a show of strength, he orders troops and tanks to the Yugoslav border. In Trieste, the Italian flag goes up throughout Zone A amid the cheers of the people as the United States and Great Britain announce plans to turn over control of the section to Italy. Across the Adriatic in the land of Tito, reaction is violent. Anti-American mobs stream through Yugoslav cities. Stones are thrown through doorways and windows of United States consulates as Trieste once again becomes Europe's powder keg.
The frames on my wall shifted again. Vladimir was born in 1908, when my grandmother was 8. She grew up at the village. Her oldest brother Ivan, Giovanni in Italian, would come to visit with his young family. His son, Vladimir, must have loved the village. He must have also met my great-grandfather Giovanni, again, and his brother Giorgio, Ivan and Jure. We spoke at least 3 dialects: Austrian, Venetian, and Slav. Multiple languages certainly helped in shifting identity, in protecting the children from racism. We probably inherited less of a suffer anti-Slavism than other people. Yet my great-grandmother's surname was Italianized, from Clay to Clay. While my father continued looking at the photo of his maternal grandparents, I presented him with my trophy. I could not resist. I had to put them all together. An imaginary lunch with my reunited family. Vladimir would have joined us shortly. So in the end, Lado, as they called him in the family, had made it home. He served as a headmaster of several Slovenian schools in Trieste, wrote books and many articles. As for my father, I don't know why Vladimir had his photo. And probably I will never know. Why do I care? Would ask my father. I wonder if that is a way to protect me from all the pain. I return to this photo often. The children, their faces haunting me. I continue to look at them until I recall something forgotten. I was 4. I was running in the yard of the kindergarten among Italians. A shadow caught my eyes. Children. They were clustered together, the Slovenian children. They looked scared, leaning against the open door. I stopped. I just knew I should have been among them. But I was happy, nobody could tell. I felt guilty for the first time in my life.